even if you don't want to sell your agency, I want you to position your agency so you have the choice to sell it. Because any agency that's going to sell for a significant amount of money is an agency that's going to give you more freedom and more time. And that's why you guys have all started your agency. Now, I was an accidental agency owner. In 99, if you guys remember how far back that was, I started an agency by accident. One of my friends looked like Justin Timberlake from NSYNC. And so I created a fake band, fake website called InShit. And it got extremely popular. And then people started asking me to design websites for them and started doing $500 websites. We grew it to over 8 figures working with clients like LegalZoom, AT&T, Hitachi, Lotus Cars, Porsche, just to name a few. So I'm also the host of the Smart Agency Masterclass. It's a podcast for the past 10 years where I've been interviewing amazing agency owners all over the world. So make sure you check that out. And about 3 years ago, I started and scaled another agency to a little over 30 million, and we've done that through acquisitions. And so today I'm going to go through kind of those 8 elements that will make you attractive to a potential buyer where you can get substantial amount of money, life-changing money if you want. I already told you I bought 10 agencies, so let's go ahead and talk about kind of the first element I look at. The first thing, remember going back to my origin story I just told you, is I was an accidental agency owner. So a lot of times, and most of you are, and if you are, for many years, and I've even seen people go for over a decade with little to no direction, and they're just reacting to the market rather than being proactive. I want the agency to know where they're going, and I want their team to know where they're going. If your team knows where you're going and you know it, now your team can make decisions without you and you're not the bottleneck. Okay. And so you have to let your team know where you're going. I always looked at transforming from an owner to an agency CEO is really kind of 5 roles: setting the vision and communicating it to the team often, coaching your leadership team only, not coaching everybody on your team. Number 3 is understanding financials. 4 is being the face of the organization. And then the 5th is really building those strategic relationships not everyone else in your company can actually do. So that is the first element that I need. And also too, when I talk about having that vision, having a clear defined niche of who we're actually helping and that kind of stuff. Let me admit them in. All right, element 2 is how are you generating business? If you are generating business on referrals, referrals aren't scalable. And if you have one channel where you're getting all your business, that's a red flag to us. So when I'm looking at buying a business, I'm looking at how many channels do they have for building their pipeline? And then I'm asking the question, how can I increase the number of clients? How can I increase those channels? How can I make them more reliable, more predictable? And what are people in your industry, how are they acquiring clients? And so I'm looking at all this. And if I'm looking at all this, you as the agency CEO and the owner or co-founder, you should be looking at it this way as well. So if all your business is just coming from Facebook ads, well, that's one channel. What if Facebook changes, which they have, right? Big time. What are you going to do in order to create more channels? This is how I look at creating multiple channels to keep your agency constantly scaling, even in a down market. I told you I started my agency in 99. So I went through the dot bomb, I grew. But it was easy to grow when I was small. But I also grew through 9/11. And I also grew through the financial crisis in '08. And I also grew through COVID, right? So all those things, but I did that because I had multiple channels. But if I relied on one channel or I didn't have any channels, then I would probably be suffering. And then I would not be lowering my prices. I wouldn't have the ability to raise my prices. So you need to look at kind of like a 3-legged stool: inbound, outbound, and a strategic partnership. And so how I look at businesses is how can I scale your inbound? So if I create more content and you're generating most of your business on inbound, what if we create more content? Is that going to bring in more business? Can I introduce a new call to action to the content that you're creating? Maybe you don't even have a call to action. Or can I introduce new hooks? Can we, do more ads? Can we spend more, right? I'm constantly looking at how can I scale each one of these channels, which is the same thing that you guys need to be doing as well. Same thing on outbound. I'm constantly looking at how do we do more calls? How can if we hire more salespeople, can I introduce a new call to action? Maybe I can tweak something that your sales team is doing to increase the number of meetings that we're doing, or can I do a new offer, which is a whole nother topic that we can kind of talk about. And then on the third channel, kind of partners. And I'm not looking for referral partners, I'm looking for strategic partners. So when I was building the first agency, we became one of the best partners with an up and coming company called Microsoft with through the SharePoint platform. And we did that with Sitefinity, some content management systems. When for the older people like me, we can remember those types of companies. But we looked at those partners and said, how can we make these people look better? How can we take their technology? How can we take their particular service and add it with ours to make it better? And so then if I was looking at someone like my old agency, I say, oh man, they're getting a ton of business from their strategic partner with Sitefinity. Can we do that with another technology company? And then how do we develop other strategic partners? All right. Number three, does your agency have predictable revenue? The best way, and it's not always just selling retainers, but the best thing that I want to look at a business and going, can I predict what we're going to do 6 months out? And how can I grow that particular account? And how can I lower the risk of them going somewhere else and increase the stickiness? I'll talk about that. Now, if you don't have long-term contracts or you have 30-day out clauses or month-to-month contracts, that's a huge red flag. I want you to think about it this way too, because if we're reacting to the market and you're getting clients, when you take on a client, do you have criteria that you're looking for? Or are you just taking on any and every client, right? What I want you to think about is, can I bring this client in and how can I grow them? Too many people are just thinking, I just want to get the client in the door, ring the bell, and that's it, and see how long I can keep them before I lose them. But what you should be doing is how can I actually build them over time? So if you take someone in at a $20,000 a month retainer, how can I grow them to 100,000? And you should actively be thinking about that. All right, on stickiness. The biggest thing to make them stick around is share wins with them or share the process with them. Too many times you assume the clients know that you're delivering value, but the clients immediately when they sign up with you, they're thinking, did I make the right decision? And then they're at the high at the honeymoon stage and it constantly goes down from there. So how can you constantly show them little wins and little things that build up bigger over time? Or how can you create collateral on your clients? Maybe you have a particular software that they use that keeps them sticky, or the cost of switching and leaving, they're going to lose a ton of benefits. Or what I've been telling a ton of agencies is, can you create a community for your clients? So if you're going after law firms, okay, how could you create a community where they connect, where you put your potential clients and your clients in, so they lose that if they leave you. Now, the fourth element is a diverse client base. If you have one client that is more than 20% of your revenue, huge red flag, because that's risky for someone buying. It's also risky for you. Now, am I saying if a huge client, a whale comes and they're going to be 20% of your revenue, to say no? Heck no. Say yes. But what I want you to assume is that they can go away. And then that should give you confidence going, man, I got this client that's this amount of revenue. I can get more of those. So now what you're doing is you're getting more whales. So now all your little clients that were minnows, now you start getting whales, and then you can start kind of leveling up. So now your whales actually become minnows and you're constantly leveling up and getting to the next level. Element number five, you have to have a leadership team running the day-to-day operations. I don't want the owner doing marketing. I don't want the owner doing sales. I'll talk about that a little bit too before I go on to the next element. And I don't want the owner doing project management, account management, or doing any type of delivery. And you got to ask yourself this: if the owner stepped away for 6 months, does the agency grow without them stepping back in? That's the telltale sign. Now, you might be saying, I'm the best salesperson since sliced bread for my agency. And that's probably right up till this point. But the easiest way to get them up to speed, because I see most owners actually into the sales, the best way to get them up is to think about what makes you the best salesperson. You have all the stories in your head of all the successes. So if you start looking today at start looking at your framework that you have. So what we do at Agency Mastery, we have a framework: attract, convert, and scale. So you can get to a point where you have the option to sell and create the freedom in your agency. So what I did is I created a Trello board with each attract, convert, scale, and sell. And then what I did is created a card for each of my success stories or case stories or testimonials and put them in there. And then what I would do with my sales team is I'd say, hey, here's a story I want you to learn. And then they have the stories that they can always relate in their Rolodex. And then eventually they'll build their own. So that's a cool hack for you. I want you to look at the sign of a bad operator. So let's say you have someone running your delivery or marketing or your sales. If they come in and try to tell you have to do all these new things and how they're hurting the business, they're a bad operator. If they add a ton of things without removing them, they're a bad operator. And if they're wondering why everyone's not doing their job, they're a bad operator. So let me tell you about a great operator. If you feel you have more bandwidth when you bring this operator, this director in, it's an amazing one, right? Like that's why you bring in a director of operations to take that pressure off. That's why you bring in a director of sales or a director of marketing. They should be coming in and creating systems to decrease work across the agency, both for you and others. And just a helpful tip or a tip: A players know their value and they cost 20% more, sometimes even more, but they'll outperform B players by 10x on the result. So do not be afraid to pay more for an A player. All right, element number 6, we're almost to the end. You got to be profitable and growing. If you don't have money to invest, you're not growing, and you don't know what your EBITDA is, which is earnings before interest, tax, amortization, something like that. It's basically net profit. It's a huge red flag. And you have to have a good story. So if you were a content marketing agency a year ago and you were trying to sell, you better have a good story about how you're going to use AI with your agency and growing. Or, a lot of people might go, well, AI is just going to take that over, which is not true. People that use AI will. And so you have to have a good story. So these are the things I look for. The next is you have to have audited KPI tracking or some way that you can look at KPIs really quick, because a growing agency should know their numbers and know the leading indicators of how they're actually doing on a number of different things. So like, for example, on a sales example, if I have to ask you, what is your show up rate? What's your close rate? What's the number that you sell? And you have to look it up, and it takes you a while to look it up. That means you're not tracking that. And that could be a huge problem. But if you have a dashboard that's tracking these, now you can say, oh, my show up rate's 50% for our webinars that drive a ton of traffic, or my close rate is, so and so. Then we can look at how can we improve that. And then the last element, which I think will surprise a lot of you, is audited financials. Every year, you should have your accountant really go through and do audited financials, because I can't tell you how many agencies we've chatted with and they thought their numbers were X and it wasn't even close. And so when we would go into our due diligence phase from the letter of intent, they would be totally shocked at the new offer. So we would say, and typically we would buy agencies that are over $1 million in EBITDA. They're making over $1 million in net profit. And we'll do a 5x multiple on that on the valuation. Okay. So let's say we say you're worth $5 million. We're going to give you $2.5 million in cash, and the other 2.5 is in ownership into the parent company. And so that would be the letter of intent. But then we discover your numbers are well below the million in EBITDA and it's 500,000. I've seen this. Anything under a million in EBITDA, your valuation, your multiple go down by 1 to 2x. So now your agency is only worth 500,000 to a million. And then you spent all this time going through due diligence. You've already kind of set your mind on selling. You've taken your foot off the gas, which if you ever go through the process, do not take your foot off the gas until money is in your bank and you've signed the deal. I've seen too many agencies fail that way. So just make sure on the audited financials. So here's what you need to do now. I want you to go back and ask yourself this. If someone bought your agency today, what would they change tomorrow? That's what I want you to focus on, okay? You all of you know the skeletons in your closet. And I'm also going to tell you this too. A lot of times when I chat with agencies that are doing really, really well, they're making over $1 million in profit. They're not working much in their business. I go, why do you want to sell? Why do you want to sell? And they're like, well, and then honestly, they get honest with me. They're like, I just don't like this one particular thing. You can remove that thing. You can fix that thing. Hold on to your agency unless you already know what you want to do next. When I sold my first agency, I was depressed after I sold because I kept relating everything to my personality as an agency owner. But I didn't realize I was creative. I was innovative. I was a father. I was a husband. I was adventurous, all this kind of stuff. That's who I am. I'm not an agency owner. Looking back, I wouldn't have sold unless I knew I was going to do this, which everything worked out and I love it. And I was meant to do this particular thing, but make sure you know exactly what you want to do next, or you could be depressed. What I want to do for you too is do something special. I have an agency playbook. It's an 8-system framework, and I want to give you guys access to the first 3 systems to show you how you can generate more leads and better clients. A lot of these things that I told you about. If you just go to swank.com, it's really easy. It's 5 letters, just swank.com, and then you'll get access to it. And then over the next couple of days, we'll give you tips and strategies for getting your agency to the level to really build that foundation. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you want more content like this, make sure you click on the link on the screen or check out your most popular podcast platform where the full episode is there. And until next time, have a swank day. What are you doing? Go check it out. Click on the link. I'll see you soon.